Just think about it for a moment. Every financial crisis we face today, every bubble that bursts, every widening gap between rich and poor, they were all predicted 1,000 years ago by one man. And that man wasn't Adam Smith or Karl Marx. He was a Muslim scholar living in the dusty streets of Baghdad, right in the middle of the Middle Ages. He warned that when money loses its moral compass, society begins to rot from the inside. And look around you. Doesn't it feel like he's describing our world exactly?
Hello everyone. Welcome to the Finance Sector channel. Here, money, power, and history collide, and nothing is ever as simple as it seems. Today, I'm going to tell you about Al-Ghazali, one of the most influential thinkers of Islam's Golden Age. His warnings about economics are so relevant that they feel like they were written yesterday. If you're ready, let's begin.
When people think about the origins of economic thought, they usually jump straight to Adam Smith, Karl Marx, or Aristotle. But there's a quieter truth hidden in medieval history that Western narratives rarely mention. Almost 1,000 years ago, long before capitalism or central banks even existed, a Muslim scholar issued a warning that still echoes in every financial crisis we experience today.
He said, "When money loses its moral compass, societies rot from within." And looking at the world we live in, he may have understood us better than we realize.
To understand Al-Ghazali, one of the most influential thinkers of Islam's Golden Age, you need to imagine a world that feels both familiar and alien. It's around the year 1100 AD. Europe is fragmented and poor, still struggling to emerge from the ruins of the early Middle Ages. Meanwhile, the Islamic world stretches from Al-Andalus in Spain to Iran and beyond. Its cities are wealthy, crowded, and sophisticated. Baghdad, Damascus, Cairo, these are centers of financial and intellectual power. Trade routes are packed with caravans carrying silk, spices, textiles, and silver. Scholars debate philosophy, law, astronomy, and medicine. Markets are bustling. The empire is rich, and wealth is transforming society faster than anything else. In this world of exploding trade and rising inequality, Abu Hamid Al-Ghazali appears, a philosopher, jurist, theologian, and critic all in one. Picture him as a thinker who could explain both the purpose of the soul and the purpose of the monetary system without blinking. Born in 1058 in Iran, Ghazali rises rapidly through the intellectual ranks. By his mid-30s, he holds one of the most prestigious teaching positions in the Islamic world. But what makes him unique isn't his prestige, it's his refusal to accept the status quo. He sees wealth growing, markets expanding, but something going wrong. A society obsessed with money yet drifting away from meaning. An economy thriving on the outside but decaying on the inside.
You don't have to look far to see the modern parallel. Ghazali begins asking a question few others dared to ask. What happens when a civilization gets rich faster than it gets wise? To answer it, he turns his attention directly to money itself.
This is the part that surprises Western audiences the most. Ghazali wasn't just a religious thinker. He was one of the earliest philosophers to analyze money from both a moral and systemic perspective. While Aristotle saw money as a practical invention, and later economists focused on mathematical analysis, Ghazali examined its psychological and spiritual impact on society. He looked at how money shapes behavior, incentives, trust, and ultimately the fate of nations.
To understand his economic ideas, you first need to understand how he viewed money. For Ghazali, money was not meant to be worshipped, hoarded, or turned into a status symbol. It was simply a tool, a facilitator of exchange. He compared money to a mirror. A mirror has no value in itself. Its value comes from what it reflects. Money is the same. Its power lies not in the gold or silver itself, but in enabling people to trade, build, and cooperate. This idea is something modern economists often claim as their own, but Ghazali wrote it in the 11th century, at a time when many Europeans still understood wealth primarily as land or plunder. From this foundation comes one of his most important insights. Hoarded money is dead money. Wealth locked in chests, hidden in rooms, or buried in courtyards wasn't just useless, it was socially destructive. Money that doesn't circulate doesn't feed workers, finance trade, or support families. It suffocates economic life. He described it as freezing the blood circulation of society, a phrase that could easily appear in today's critiques of inequality. But Ghazali wasn't just complaining about greed. His argument was systematic. When the rich hoard money, they create scarcity, not from a lack of resources, but from blocked circulation. Prices become distorted, markets collapse, people suffer. This criticism leads to his next major idea: speculation destroys trust. Ghazali had no patience for merchants who manipulated prices, created artificial shortages, or profited from crises. He saw speculative behavior not as clever strategy, but as moral corruption, profit without contribution. Whoever profits from the suffering of others profits from corruption, he wrote. And corruption, in his view, was contagious. Once it took hold in markets, it spread to institutions and eventually to the entire society. 100 years earlier. But Ghazali was not anti-profit. He was not anti-business. He wasn't calling for monastic vows or poverty. He strongly believed in trade. He believed markets were natural and necessary. He believed wealth could be meaningful and even noble. His real target was fraudulent trade: deception, lies, false weights, hidden defects, or manipulated information. He believed markets only function when participants trust one another, and once trust collapses, the economy follows soon after. In this sense, he was one of the earliest thinkers to describe what modern economists now call transaction costs, information asymmetry, and moral hazard, without the jargon. Another key insight was the value of labor. He argued that work is inherently dignified and that unearned wealth is spiritually dangerous. Money earned through effort builds character, while wealth accumulated through manipulation corrodes it. This might sound moralistic, but his logic was practical. Societies are strong when people contribute. They weaken when people exploit. But Ghazali didn't stop at individuals. He also delivered one of history's earliest critiques of state monetary policy. Medieval rulers, just like many modern ones, would debase gold or silver coins to stretch their budgets, effectively taxing people through hidden inflation. Ghazali condemned this practice outright. To him, debasing money was theft. It eroded trust in the marketplace. It punished the poor who received weakened currency. It destabilized the financial system from top to bottom. He believed the state had a role in protecting fair markets, but that role was limited. Leaders should safeguard the economy, not manipulate it for short-term gain. He warned that unjust rulers destroy prosperity faster than any external enemy. Again, the modern parallels need no explanation. Ghazali's warnings about rulers came not from abstract theory, but from observing the real behavior of real states. In his lifetime, political fragmentation was increasing. Dynasties were fighting for legitimacy. Local governors were chasing more revenue. And as always, when rulers felt their control slipping, the economy was the first place they tightened their grip. Some raised taxes to unbearable levels. Some debased currency to stretch budgets. Some seized merchant assets. Others borrowed irresponsibly and left the bill for future generations. None of these tactics were new, and in Ghazali's view, none solved the underlying problem. He believed corruption at the top spread downward like poison. When a ruler deceives his people, merchants feel justified in deceiving their customers. When institutions fail to act with integrity, individuals see no need to act responsibly. The entire economic order becomes a chain reaction of distrust, from the palace treasury to the neighborhood market. The result was stark but simple. A society can survive poverty, but it cannot survive corruption. Economic collapse rarely comes from running out of money or resources. It comes from the collapse of trust, the invisible glue that holds together every transaction, every contract, every coin, and every institution. From this perspective, his ideas about money gained their full meaning. For Ghazali, the stability of money depended entirely on honesty. Debasement, reducing the gold or silver content, wasn't just bad policy, it was deceit.
It was betrayal. A ruler tampering with money wasn't being clever, he was slowly stealing from his own people. What seemed like a small change in the purity of coinage was to Ghazali the beginning of financial decay. He predicted that if states manipulated money too often, people would eventually lose faith, abandon the local currency, and turn to stronger foreign ones.
1,000 years later, those same dynamics played out in Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Argentina, and every modern case where people flee their own currency. Meanwhile, today's debates and anxieties about inflation reflect exactly what this medieval scholar understood. Money is ultimately a system of belief, and when people stop believing, the system stops working.
But Ghazali's view of finance went beyond money and taxation. He understood something deeper about human nature. People hoard out of fear. They speculate out of greed. They cheat when they think they won't get caught. They manipulate money because money is easy to manipulate. They rationalize immoral profit because others are doing it too. And once a society normalizes exploitation, collapse has already begun. This belief guided one of his most powerful insights. To fix the economy, you must fix the incentives that shape human behavior. Laws matter, markets matter, but behind everything are people making choices driven by emotion, ambition, fear, and desire. Unless a society's systems direct those incentives toward productive and honest behavior, the economy drifts toward corruption, instability, and self-destruction.
That's why Ghazali placed such emphasis on the moral dimension of wealth. Irresponsible wealth wasn't just spiritually dangerous, it was a threat to the common good. He believed wealth wasn't inherently bad, it was simply incomplete when it served no purpose. A society is strong when individuals contribute more than they extract, when the drive to accumulate is balanced by the duty to uplift the community. But when wealth becomes detached from social responsibility, when profit-seeking ignores communal well-being, the system becomes fragile. A selfish society eventually collapses under its own weight, and when it does, everyone pays, including the rich who thought they were untouchable. Civilizations rise when they understand balance.
They fall when that balance breaks.
And that brings us straight to the modern world, a world where Ghazali's insights feel less like medieval philosophy and more like a diagnosis of today. We live in a global economy where money moves faster than meaning, where wealth inequality is approaching levels not seen in centuries, where markets often reward speculation rather than contribution, where trust in institutions falls year after year, where inflation quietly erodes purchasing power, and where financial bubbles regularly inflate and burst. Wherever you look, the problems Ghazali described are echoing on a global scale. His critique of hoarding reflects today's debates about billionaires, offshore accounts, and concentrated wealth. His warnings about speculation mirror concerns over housing crises, crypto volatility, shadow banking, and predatory markets. His condemnation of manipulated money strikes at the heart of today's monetary policy debates. And his belief that trust is the foundation of prosperity explains why nations with honest courts, predictable regulation, and transparent governance have stronger currencies and more resilient economies. What strikes modern readers most is how little the world has changed. The technology is different, the markets are faster, the scale is global rather than regional, but the underlying human behaviors remain the same. If Ghazali looked at our current system, runaway debt, speculative frenzies, widening inequality, political gridlock, and institutional distrust, he would probably say exactly what he wrote 1,000 years ago. When justice is lost, prosperity cannot remain. It's an uncomfortable truth. Economies don't collapse because the numbers stop adding up. They collapse because the people in the system stop trusting one another. They collapse because of incentives that reward wrong behavior. They collapse because institutions fail to protect the justice that makes markets possible. It's human emotion, human fear, human greed, human shortcuts, not abstract economic formulas that drive civilizations into crisis. Ghazali wasn't preaching religion. He was describing reality. He understood something economists often struggle to admit. Money is not a mechanical object, it is a moral ecosystem.
And when the moral framework collapses, the financial system follows soon after. That's why his ideas matter today. In an era defined by record debt, speculative excess, institutional distrust, and financial anxiety, his central message becomes a survival principle. When money becomes detached from morality, the system will, sooner or later, break. Understanding this isn't just about financial education. It's about protecting ourselves, because history repeats itself. If I've given you a new perspective, please subscribe. The answer to every question is hidden in history. You just need to know where to look.